But hi everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. My name's Nell Thompson and I'm the Secretary of the Australian Institute of Animal Management, and I'll be hosting the webinar for you today. I've been on the AIM committee since 2013 and I'm also the coordinator of the National Getting to Zero program. The Australian Institute of Animal Management is the national peak body representing local government animal management officers, and we tend to call it AIM. The AIM committee consists of a wide range of professionals engaged in the various aspects of animal management. AIM seeks to support those engaged in the business of animal management and the function itself by providing training and information, opportunities for networking and collaboration, and by encouraging the use of best practice, policy and practices. AIM understands the significant pressures placed on local government and not-for-profit rescue and rehoming service providers when working in the companion animal management space. We welcome new members and people can join via our website at aim.org.au. So to today's session. Once I hand over to our presenter, there'll be around 50 minutes of presentation and around 10 minutes of question time once the presentation has concluded. The recording of this webinar will be accessible via our website to all members to watch at any time. We're going to ask that everyone mutes themselves during the presentation unless our presenter indicates otherwise. If you have questions, you can start putting them in the Q&A section and we'll get through as many as we can at the end of the session. If you have very quick questions that relate to your understanding of the content, please put your hand up and we'll try to get to them during the presentation. And if you have more questions or we don't get to yours during the question time, you can send a message to our Facebook page and we'll deal with it that way. As always, please excuse any working from home background noises that may filter through. I was in a meeting yesterday and my dogs decided to have a WWE style wrestling match full of vocalizations. It was all in good fun, but made for interesting listening for everybody else. I'm happy to introduce our presenter for today, Dr. Vanessa Rolfe. Vanessa is a consultant, counsellor and educator to those who work with and care for animals. She has a PhD with a specialisation in psychology, human-animal interactions, a master's degree in counselling and psychotherapy, and a Bachelor of Arts with honours in psychology. She's blended her practical and theoretical knowledge of human psychology and human-animal interactions in a number of previous roles over the last 20 years. These include veterinary nursing, psychology lecturer at Monash University, researcher at the Animal Welfare Science Centre at the University of Melbourne. She's an associate member of the Australian Psychological Society and has registration with the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia, as well as further qualifications in mindfulness, animal bereavement, and certification as a compassion fatigue educator and therapist with the Green Cross Academy of Traumatology. In addition to her private practice, Vanessa is a research fellow in the School of Psychology and Public Health at La Trobe University. Her research areas include compassion fatigue, human-animal interactions, and human well-being. She regularly publishes her work in peer-reviewed journals and presents at international and national conferences. Vanessa works with a range of animal care industries, including animal shelters, veterinary clinics, zoos, and research facilities. She also provides individual counselling and support to companion animal owners and professional animal caregivers from a range of industries. So we're so happy to have you here today, Vanessa. Over to you.
Thank you, Nell, and thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And yes, there might be some background noise here because I've got my little Velvet behind me who likes to say hello sometimes. So thank you for that, Nell. So today we're going to be talking about mental health in the workplace, a guide to flourishing for individuals and teams. And I'm so excited to be here, and thank you so much for taking time out for talking about mental health. It really shows that they're making it a priority in your life. So well done, especially at this time of year. Okay, I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging. I want to in particular acknowledge the Yalak Willem clan of the Boonwurrung, who are part of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the lands where I now currently work and live, and do feel free to acknowledge the lands where you live, the traditional custodians of the lands where you currently work and live today, and you can do so in the chat box. So Nell has already done an amazing job at introducing me. So as Nell also had noted, that I do have my private practice where I work with people who care for animals, as well as having a research role at the School of Psychology and Public Health. And there I work with an amazing group of people in the Anthrozoology Research Group. And there we focus on researching all things to do with humans and animals and their relationships. As part of my practice, I'm so lucky because I get to work with people just like yourselves in the capacity of providing counselling to groups and individuals, as well as providing educational offerings like this one. This is my dog Velvet that I was talking to you about. She's just turned 13. She's living her best life, and we certainly enjoy her company, and I continue to learn a lot from her. My memberships, Nell has also mentioned, as part of my role as a counsellor, I have memberships with PACFA, with APS, as well as the American Psychological Association. And my previous roles, again, were a psychology lecturer, veterinary nurse, and animal welfare researcher. So really lucky that I've been able to blend my love of animals as well as helping people in these roles. So I'm very, very lucky. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about mental health in the workplace. And to do so, what I want to do is just to clear up some definitions and concepts around the ideas of mental health and wellbeing. So we'll talk about what that is, what do we mean by that. We'll also then discuss some common kind of signs of mental health difficulties. And I think that's really good to know so that you can identify, I guess, when you might be experiencing some mental health difficulties, but also so that you can identify this in perhaps people that you work with or people that you're close to, your friends, your family, and others that you care about. Okay, so then what we're going to do is introduce you to Seligman's PERMA model, and I'll talk you through how to use this to promote wellbeing in the workplace as well as outside of the workplace too. And hopefully you're going to be feeling like this at the end of the webinar. I'm pretty excited. All right, so when we're talking about mental health, it's really important to know that we all have mental health. Sometimes when we're talking about mental health, it can sometimes in the media be used as being synonymous with mental ill health, with not being well. But it's really important to recognise that mental health is just like physical health. We all have it. Okay, and it also exists on a continuum. Okay, so it's not it's not you either have mental health or you don't, or you're unwell or you're well, okay? So it exists on a continuum. And the way I like to describe it is kind of ranges from flourishing. And by flourishing, what I mean is it's not just about feeling happy, although it can include that, but actually you can flourish without feeling happy all the time. But flourishing is about feeling satisfied with your life, being aware of your strengths, being able to use your strengths, feeling like you're accomplishing meaningful tasks, and being able to establish deep and lasting connections with people in your community. Okay, so that's what I mean by flourishing. So part of the mental health continuum can include flourishing. It can include feeling okay. You might also have some days where you're struggling, or some points in your life where you're struggling. There are also times when we might be diagnosed with a mental health illness, and that's when it's severely impacting our daily life. Okay, so mental health exists on a continuum from flourishing, feeling amazing, to severely impacting our functioning. So have a think about, perhaps as I talk about this, where are you in this continuum right now? How are you feeling? if you're not perhaps at this flourishing stage, which many of you, if you're not feeling that, completely understandable given the past 2 years, and we're heading up to Christmas, and for many people it can be a stressful time. If you're not feeling like that, that's okay. My hope for you today is that when I go through this PERMA model, I will give you some tips and tools on how we can get you back to flourishing, how we can get you back to feeling well, feeling happy, in your happy place. All right, so let's talk about some concepts and definitions. What do we mean by well-being? So we've talked about mental health. We understand that mental health exists on a continuum. What do we mean by well-being? Well-being is when we're coping with the demands of our day-to-day life, when we're feeling really productive at work, when we're interacting positively with others, and when we contribute to the community. So it's basically also when we're realizing our own abilities and we realize our potential. So that might look a little bit like having, a nice positive sense of self-esteem and having some self-efficacy. So understanding our strengths and having a nice sense of well-being and sense of self. When we have poor mental health, what that might look like is that we might say we're feeling overwhelmed, we might feel we're struggling to cope, perhaps you're feeling down, stressed or anxious. Typically, when someone is experiencing poor mental health, what we will see is that there's changes in thoughts, feelings, and behaviour. You can experience poor mental health without actually being diagnosed with a mental illness. Now, when someone is diagnosed with a mental illness, what that means is that they basically have been experiencing poor mental health for a prolonged period of time, and it is affecting their ability to enjoy their life. It's affecting the impact which they want to live their life. So what I would like to invite you all to do right now, for those of you that aren't familiar with Slido, it's something that I have just found and I'm really excited about, which I find it's a really nice way to interact during webinars when we can't meet face-to-face. If you can, we're all familiar with QR codes right now. If you have your smartphone available, you can contribute to this poll by popping your camera onto the QR code and answering this poll for me. So I know someone who has experienced or is experiencing a mental illness. Now, do remember, this poll is completely anonymous. So we're not going to know who is answering what. It just will give us an idea of where we're at. Okay. So I'll give you a little bit of time there. And thank you so much for contributing. That's really, really great. Okay, a few more people entering. Yep. Okay. Okay. So it looks like it's quite common. All right. So here we have 100%. I know someone who has experienced or is experiencing a mental illness. All right, thank you. Thank you so much for contributing. All right, we're going to go on to the next one now. What about this? All right, I know someone who has experienced a mental health issue in the last 2 years. Give you some time there to answer. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So again, really common that people know someone who has experienced a mental health issue in the last 2 years. All right, so this is what we know about the research, is that really is reflected in the research right now. So we know mental illness is really common. So 1 in 5 Australians, or 20% of Australians, report a mental or behavioural condition. And what is meant by the term behavioural condition here are when we're talking about neurodiversity, for example, so perhaps someone who might be diagnosed with autism or someone who has ADHD, okay, so neurodiverse individuals or other conditions like conduct disorder, for example. So this is what is meant by the term behavioural condition here. This is how they've just the people that have done the National Health Survey have defined behavioural condition. So this is published in the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare in 2020. The survey was done in 2017 to 2018. So 1 in 5 Australians report a mental or behavioural condition. What we also know about the COVID-19 pandemic is that it's actually increased vulnerability. So what you are noticing there, you know, we had 100% of those that completed that poll that have recognised that someone has experienced a mental health issue in the past 2 years. And what we know is that depression, anxiety and stress is actually 3 times greater than current population norms in people with no pre-existing mental health condition. Okay, so it's really placed all of us at risk. We also know that people who have pre-existing mental health conditions, so people that were already experiencing depression and anxiety, were more vulnerable to the stresses of COVID-19 pandemic and all of the other stresses that came along with this health crisis, because it was really not just a health crisis, but it's an economic, it's a social crisis as well. So the stats show, and this is an Australian study that was just recently published, that depression, anxiety and stress is 5 to 5.5 times greater in people with a pre-existing mental health condition. So that's really important for us to know, not just, you know, in a workplace setting, but also to know in our everyday lives, okay, that, you know, we are at increased levels of vulnerability, and those around us, those people that we care about us, are also feeling it as well. So what does this have to do with the workplace? What we know from the statistics is that when people are basically, when they feel well, they work well, all right? And you might recognize that yourself. When you're having a really good day, when you're feeling really well, your day at work will just go really well, all right? You'll be functioning at your best. You'll be able to concentrate. You'll be more productive, all right? And that's the same with everyone else. So when people feel well, they work well. They get along better with others as well. They're more able to feel those connections with people, to feel a sense of belonging. So promoting mental health in the workplace is really important, and it's even more important right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic, because everyone, you know, their cups are already full. Okay, so we need to make steps to promote mental health and wellbeing in the workplace. We also know that it's actually associated with increases in productivity, greater levels of engagement, and more people are more likely to hang around in a workplace where wellbeing is promoted. It's also associated with lower rates of absenteeism and workplace conflict. So given we know that promoting wellbeing and being aware of mental health, having good awareness of mental health in the workplace, knowing that it's important, what might be some signs that someone might be struggling, or better still, what are some signs that we can recognize in ourselves when we might be having a really difficult time? Basically, it's any change in how you're thinking, feeling and acting. Okay, so maybe have a think about, in the past 6 months, have there been any changes in how I'm acting, how I'm thinking, or how I'm feeling? Are there any changes in how my employees are responding to me, how my co-workers are responding to me, or people at home, or my pets at home, animals that I'm working with? Are they responding differently to me? You know, that's sometimes a nice way to kind of pick up that maybe there's something going on there. Okay, so these are some questions to try and start to ask yourself. Have there been any changes here? Am I experiencing any changes in my attitudes towards work, or how I'm feeling at work? Am I more or less engaged? What's going on there? So do make sure that you're asking yourself these questions. But there's also some other ways to pick up on some signs of mental health difficulties. So what we know is that we might typically see some physical changes, some changes in thoughts and feelings, and some changes in behaviours. Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, but it just gives you some kind of signs to look out for. So sometimes there might be more fatigue. There can be physical issues like having stomach pains, gastrointestinal issues, feeling aches and pains like headaches, shoulder pain, back pain. There might be appetite or weight changes. People might find that they're sleeping more than usual or that they're having trouble sleeping. You might also observe in yourself or in others that you might see trembling or shaking. Some changes in thoughts and feelings can include the person may feel more anxious, or you might be feeling more anxious. There will be tearfulness sometimes. Some people may just be feeling low and lacking motivation. They may start to say that they're just feeling really helpless or hopeless. You might be feeling like this too. So remembering these are signs that you could look in for yourself and for others that you work with. You might find difficulty in making decisions. People might appear quite distracted or confused and have difficulty completing tasks. So these might be some signs. So what you want to look out for is any kind of changes, all right? So something that might be uncharacteristic. You might notice withdrawal from others. That might be a sign for yourself. You might find that you're just feeling like everything is a bit of an effort, even interacting with people. There may be substance use. Perhaps as a way to self-medicate. There may be substance use or abuse, irritability, perhaps even working longer hours than usual. Now, this is a really important one, I think, to note, because there may be someone at work who's working longer hours than usual, and sometimes people will go, oh, wow, they're really committed. That's a really great thing. But it might actually be a sign, if you're noticing some other signs as well, like this person's withdrawing from others, they're disconnected, that there's signs that they're feeling low or anxious or confused, that might be a sign that there's something else going on there. Okay, you might also notice impaired performance, or someone who's normally getting along with others is not. All right, there might be absenteeism, so people might be calling in sick, or presenteeism. So that's really when people are actually showing up to work physically, but their mind isn't really on the job. So these are some common signs to look out for. Again, not an exhaustive list. And also I want to note that even if you're finding you're ticking these boxes, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're meeting criteria for a diagnosis of a mental illness. All right. So we're not in the job of diagnosing anyone here, but it is a sign to try and seek out and seek support. So perhaps speak to a health professional and find out what's going on, because sometimes this can also indicate that there might be some other health problem going on. So, but do be aware of these signs of mental health difficulties. Okay. So say, we've talked about this continuum, maybe you've noticed that you're not quite at that flourishing stage, you're kind of feeling like you're a bit okay, or maybe struggling, or maybe you have been diagnosed with a mental health illness. What can we do? Maybe me showing this checklist, you've kind of noticed that you're checking some of this stuff off and you're recognizing it even now as I'm talking. What can we do? So here's a really nice, neat model that can give you some tips and tools on how you can help yourself get back to flourishing. And what I'm going to do is go through the tools. I'll talk about what each of these mean, and then I'll give you some tips for individuals and for teams and what you can work on. And hopefully at the end of my discussion, we'll have some time to maybe talk about how you can apply this theory to your workplace and give some specific examples so we can get some discussion going. All right. So this is a PERMA model. It was first introduced by Martin Seligman in 2011. And the P stands for positive emotions, E stands for engagement, R stands for relationships, and A is for accomplishments. And what we know is there is a whole bunch of research that shows when people are engaging in each of these things, then they're more likely to report that they're satisfied with their life, that they have high levels of well-being, and that they have less psychological distress. So positive emotion, what does that mean? So of course, what you might think of positive emotion, you might think happy. Yes, that is one of them, but it's not all of the positive emotions we're feeling about. So this is what I mean. Like you might say, well, I'm not feeling happy every single second of my life, does that mean I'm not flourishing? Well, no, it actually doesn't. Okay, so you can still flourish without feeling happy 100% of the time. So there are other positive emotions like love, gratitude, compassion, and hope. What we also know is not only to feeling these positive emotions, it feels nice, but also what it does is it will undo the harmful effects of negative emotions, and it promotes resilience. Okay. So I want you to have a think about this. When did you last feel positive emotions in the workplace? Maybe write it down if you've got some pen and paper near you, or make a mental note. What did you feel? Okay, maybe you were feeling happy, hopeful, grateful. What were you doing? And who was present? Maybe it was animals that you work with. Maybe it was particular colleagues. What was present at the time? What were you doing? Maybe you're engaging with the public. Maybe you're doing some education programs, responsible pet ownership programs. What was it? What were you doing? Okay. Hopefully you've come up with some examples. My tip to you is try and make sure that you're doing that more often. All right. If you can't, I'm going to give you some ideas on what else you can do. Okay. So again, identify and engage in activities that energize you and relax you. Now, maybe you're finding, I'm not really feeling positive emotions in the workplace right now. What else can I do? Well, there is a whole bunch of things that you can do outside of the workplace as well. All right. So try and identify and engage in some activities that energize you and relax you. Okay. Spend time with people that you care about. Hang out with your pets. Hang out with other animals. Was just having a discussion with someone the other day, and they said there was nothing better than just sitting in the paddock with their horses, because it was really grounding for them, and it was a really great way for them to kind of re-energize and reset. So spending time in nature can also help. We know that patting a dog, for example, also can increase our feel-good hormones like oxytocin and dopamine, and lower stress hormones like oxytocin. So what are some tips for teams? Do something good for someone at work. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could just be something as simple as buying someone a coffee on the way to work. Okay, do something good for someone. So when we're talking about positive emotions, we can do something good for ourselves, and we can also do something good for others, because that also increases positive emotions. Okay, it feels good to do something good. Who are you grateful for at work? So there you're practicing gratitude. You're also kind of helping someone else feel positive emotions as well. So who are you grateful for at work, and why? And can you go and tell them? Maybe you write them a letter, give them a card, or tell them verbally. Say, you know, I really appreciated the way that you handled that investigation. I thought you did a fantastic job. Okay. So who are you grateful for and why? So there's some tips for you. I'm going to move on to engagement. Engagement refers to being really engaged in what you're doing. So your mind is in the present moment, you're fully focused on the task. Okay, so say you're going for a run. You are focused exactly on the run and nothing else. You're not worried about a future meeting. You're not replaying conversations you've had in your head. All right, you're not thinking about that Christmas list or Christmas things you've all got to get, you know, ticked off the to-do list. Another word for this is flow. Some of you may have heard of the term flow, and that's basically just engaging in an activity just for the sake of engaging in it because you enjoy it. All right, so you're not doing it for a particular outcome. So for example, I really like running. I do it because I just like running. Okay, so it might be different to perhaps running for the purpose of losing weight or running for the purpose of getting fit. So you're just doing it because you like doing it. We know that flow is more likely if skills match the challenge that's presented by the activity. So when you want to find your flow, you don't want to pick something that's too easy, because then you're going to just become quite bored. And you don't want to pick something too hard that you're going to feel really stressed or overwhelmed by it. So for example, if I was to set myself the goal of doing a marathon, 40 Ks, I'm not going to be in flow because I'm going to really struggle and find that a little bit hard. All right. So you've got to kind of find your sweet spot there if you want to find flow. So have a think about, when did you last experience flow? Hopefully it was at work, may not be, but when did you last experience flow? What were you doing? How did you feel? Okay, so have a think about that. Again, if you've got paper or pen, write it down. Try and increase these opportunities for flow. Okay, if you're finding that maybe there was an activity that you used to get flow from now, and now you're not, because you've kind of increased your skill level to a point where now you're getting a bit bored, can you kind of add some additional challenges onto that skill? Okay, maybe I'm using sport as an example here, but or let's think about, taekwondo, for example. Maybe you're at a certain skill level where, it's easy now for you. So do you want to step up, get another belt? Or even with an instrument, do you want to try and increase the intensity there, make it a bit more complex? Okay, so these are just examples, but can you increase the skill level if you're finding you're a bit bored when you used to experience flow? Okay, so here's some other tips for you if you haven't thought of anything. So one thing might be playing an instrument. Many people experience flow when they're playing an instrument. Is there exercise? My dog's running up on my leg, sorry. Is there exercise that you can do? Some people really engage in flow when they're playing team sports, okay, or running. Reading is another one. Writing, creative writing. Many people experience flow while they're writing creatively, or journal writing. Some ideas for work teams includes really identifying what your strengths are in your workplace and playing to your strengths. So recognize what you're good at and what you're not so good at, and you want to play to your strengths. And that goes for outside of the workplace as well. But in teams, you want to identify what you're good at and find some ways that you can use strengths in your work. And also another thing what you want to do in work teams is actually acknowledge the strengths of others, because you all are unique. You all have unique strengths, okay? So acknowledge the strengths of the others that you work with and utilize the strengths of others in your team. So hopefully there are some strengths that might be coming up for you as I'm talking about this. Maybe you've got strengths in, a real love of learning, and you've got strengths for, I guess, evidence-based practice. So maybe you're really great at finding out what recent evidence there is in terms of animal behaviour. Is that your strength? Can you contribute that to the workplace? Maybe you're really terrific at educating those in the public. Maybe that's something that you really enjoy, and it's a real strength because you're able to connect with people. So is that a strength that you can really play to in the workplace? All right, so identify that. If you really want some additional ideas, there's also the viacharacter.org that you can check out. There's a free survey that you can do. Now, I think if you want to get the full report, you do have to pay for it, but to get just your top strengths, you will get that one just with the free survey that you can do. So if you're interested, jump online, check out www.viacharacter.org, and that will give you some ideas on what your top strengths are. Now, they're not quite so much strengths in terms of, I've got strengths in dog training. They're more like virtues in terms of strengths. So for example, some of them are courage, love of learning, and there's some other strengths like gratitude. Okay, so there's also, we'll give you some tips on how you can play to your strengths and how you can use that to help yourself get to flourishing. So do check that out if you're interested. Okay, relationships. We're talking about positive relationships here. So it refers to feeling socially connected, feeling cared about and supported by others. So social support is a terrific buffer for all forms of stress. That also includes compassion fatigue and workplace stress. All right. So we know that social support, we're social people. We're built for connections, and we actually do better and we feel better when we feel supported and connected to other people. So we want to give support and we want to also get support. So we know that when we're providing support to other people, that's also linked to well-being. It's also important to mention that, I know a lot of people, based on my work in the past 2 years, did feel a little disconnected to others. But the really great thing that I saw was that people were finding alternative ways to connect. So it didn't have to necessarily be a physical connection. And to give some examples, I saw in my neighbourhood these stones that were appearing when we were all in lockdown, and they were quite beautiful, as you can see there on the right. When I investigated this a little bit further, this was actually a global phenomenon. So there were many countries that were in lockdown that were also doing the same. And in a kind of way, it was like a way to not only connect with our neighbourhood, but also the world around us, because it was a global practice. Another practice that was a global one was, you may have seen this in your neighbourhood, and that was the teddy bears in the window in our very first lockdown in 2020. And that was also a global phenomenon as well. So have a think about what relationships mean the most to you. And it doesn't have to be a relationship with a human. It can be with a non-human animal as well. All right. So how often did you spend time with them? How did you feel after spending time with them? All right. So even when people might be feeling quite down, or perhaps they're introverted, what we know is that when people are actually spending time with those that they feel that care about them, we know that that can really lift mood. So think about what relationships mean the most to you. How often do you spend time with them? How did you feel afterwards? Okay, so hopefully that will give you some ideas on how you can promote positive relationships in your life. And think about people at work that you might be relating to too. Some tips for individuals: engage in community activities. So when we're talking about connections, yes, there are connections with our family unit, with our pets around us, but can you connect with those in your community? Perhaps you're with a sports group, perhaps you're with a church, okay? So can you connect with your community and those around you? Being a member of AIM, for example, is another way to engage with those around you, to connect with others. So do maintain those connections with friends, family, colleagues. Part of connection also means that, if you are feeling really distressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, there is so much help for you. Beyond Blue is also there, which I've not got written on the slide, but Beyond Blue has some amazing resources, as does Black Dog Institute. But if you have an employee assistance program, it's there for you. Utilise it. Speak to your health practitioner. Lifeline is also available for crisis support on 131114. Teams, do something good for a workmate. Continue to be curious about the people that you work with. Sometimes if you're seeing someone every single day, that curiosity stops, for example. So can you learn something new about the people that you work with? Maybe make that a goal. Every week, learn something new about your work team. So maintain that curiosity and openness with people that you work with, and check in with them. If you've noticed that when I went through the signs of mental health difficulties, that maybe some people that you work with are ticking that, please do check in with them and say, hey, I've noticed that you're not quite yourself lately. Are you okay? All right. And follow up too. How are you feeling? I noticed last week you were a bit down. How are you feeling this week? Seem a little bit happier. How did you do that? What's been going on? Other follow-up questions like, How did your daughter go with their ballet classes? Okay, people really like the fact that you remembered stuff about them. Okay, so do check in with them, maintain and promote those positive relationships in the workplace. Shared activities also help to build and maintain connections. And if you've got Christmas parties coming up, you'll know what I mean, that, you know, sometimes getting out of your workplace and not focusing on work tasks, but focusing on something else can really help build and maintain those connections. So meaning. Engage in activities that have purpose, that contribute to meaning. So purpose and meaning, they're linked with life satisfaction, job satisfaction, and well-being. We know that many people that work with animals, this may be you as well, that just being able to make a difference to humans and non-human animals really gives people meaning and purpose in their work. But what gives you meaning and purpose in your work? You know, have a think about what that is. Write it down. What gives you meaning in your work? Have a think about those things. Some examples. Reflect on ways that you've made a positive difference in the lives of people and animals around you. Engage in activities that align with your values. What are your values? Are your values in line with what's going on at work? Discuss and create a shared vision together. So as work teams, work on a shared vision and work towards that. What are your shared goals? What are your values? How can you create meaning together? Accomplishments. Accomplishments, it's all about working towards and achieving goals because we know it contributes to well-being. We know it also contributes to feelings of self-efficacy, like, yes, I can set myself a goal and I can do it. I can work towards that. And that's really satisfying. It doesn't have to be a big thing either. It can be something as simple as, you know, not stopping off at Macca's on the way home and getting those nuggets and swapping it for a healthy snack like an apple, okay? So I'm not talking big stuff here. Just set yourself some simple goals. So have a think about, when was the last time you accomplished a goal? And what was it? Do remember, it doesn't have to be a really big thing. Sometimes you might not be aware that you actually achieved goals. So it's really useful to reflect, oh, yeah, I did that. I'm actually quite proud of myself, you know, and even do this in a work meeting where you're kind of reflecting maybe at the end of this year, reflect on all the stuff that you accomplished during such a difficult time, you know, and congratulate each other and talk about how you did it, because that's really important too. So yes, I achieved this goal, but talk about how you achieved the goal. That's really important too. That way you're going to recognize your strengths while you're doing it. So how did you feel when you achieved it? Tipping you feeling pretty good. So here's some tips. Acknowledge your wins. All right, have a think about it. They might not be immediately aware, so you'll have to just think and make a list of all the accomplishments. What did you achieve in the past 6 months, in the past year, past week, whatever that is? Learn something new. Reflect on past achievements. I know someone has just started rock climbing. And so they're learning something new when they're feeling a real sense of accomplishment, and they're actually engaging as well. So sometimes there can be crossover here with the PERMA model. So there's engagement and accomplishment. Reflect on your past achievements. As a team, share your wins with each other too, and help others recognize their accomplishments, because they might be having a hard time. They might not be able to recognize that they have made achievements. So do help each other recognize their own achievements too, and break down larger projects into small achievable goals, because when you have got to set a really, really large goal, a really big goal, it can feel overwhelming. So do try and break that up into small achievable steps, and set SMART goals too. Okay. So make sure that they're specific, make sure they're measurable, they're achievable, and they're relevant, realistic, and that they're time bound, okay? All right, so there you have it. To flourish as a team and as individuals, use the PERMA model. It's really simple, it's really easy, and it's going to give you some great tips on how you can get back to flourishing, how you can work together as both individuals, how you can improve your well-being as an individual and as a work team as well. Now, I've left some time for discussion as well. But I also want to let you know that if you do want to contact me after this webinar, do feel free to do so. I have a website there, drvanessarolf.com.au. You can check out my website there. I've got information on compassion fatigue and pet loss and bereavement. But contact me via my email, which is virolf@gmail.com. And I'm also available on social media through Facebook and Instagram. But what I would really like to do now is that hopefully my intention is that this talk has inspired you a little bit, and I would love to hear from you in terms of how you might use the PERMA model to improve your well-being in the workplace. And if you've got any questions as well, to feel free to ask. So thank you so much for your attention here.
Thank you, Vanessa. I love that we could finish off on this note, like at the end of 2021 of all years.
Yeah.